Bill, I don't think it's working. Hang on. Let me try going live again. Go live. Go live. Why is it? All right. It's showtime. And everybody, thanks for joining us for our live stream autopsy, where we're going to be looking into the good, the bad, and everything in between from the 10-year run of the DC Extended Universe. And even though we still have Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2 on deck, with the Flash bombing so spectacularly on the DCEU's 10th anniversary, the time feels right to examine the key drivers behind both the successes and the failures of what is the 9th highest grossing film franchise in movie history. And I'm not expecting we're all going to see eye to eye on which films worked and which ones didn't. So if you have something to say, just let us know in the chat. And I'm going to be experimenting with doing some polls throughout the live stream to see where people stand, because what I'm coming to realize is that even diehard DC fans don't really see eye to eye on a lot of these flicks. Also, one more quick announcement. I'm going to start experimenting with live streams for channel members once a month, and I'm going to be donating all these memberships, so it won't cost anybody a thing. And after a couple of months, people like those membership live streams, then we can make it more of like an official thing. But with all that out of the way, Mr. Scurry, welcome to the live stream, and welcome to the birds of Amsterdam. I can hear them like the jungle in the background. And thank you for editing that new intro for the live streams, which we'll be using.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I like to think of this as it's an Irish week, you know, like in the Wire, the cop is on the pool table. We're all having some Guinness and some Jamesons, and we're celebrating someone's life. Hopefully, you have something good to say about the guy.
Yeah, I've got a lot of good memories and a lot of horrible memories, and it's such a strange mixed roller coaster ride over the last 10 years, but it's just incredible that here we are at the 10-year anniversary, and it's like a unique opportunity to look at a franchise, the beginning, middle, and the end, and really just figure out like where it went wrong, where it went right, and what the future might hold. And I'm expecting, we're going to be getting a lot of strong opinions from folks, but I've got a couple official questions for Bill from me. Got a couple questions from Twitter, but if people want to dive in the chat or with super chats, whatever, by all means, we're all here to have this wake together. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and let her rip with my first question. So let's start with the fact I completely, totally, utterly got my box office projections for The Flash totally wrong. I thought it was going to be a smash, and it turned out to be the Hindenburg, opening far below even the most pessimistic industry projections. So I'm officially taking the L and admitting that I am totally full of shit. And speaking of which, over the last few days, I've read a lot of different explanations as to why The Flash bombed so severely. So now it's your turn, Bill. Why did The Flash fail this past weekend?
Well, you could say that the simple explanation was it wasn't a good film, you know, rather than there being sort of one silver bullet that killed the fucking thing. But, you know, to get granular about it, look, Ezra Miller was deeply unpopular. As much as you have some people who are out on social media defending the person, making these itemized lists of things that they have and have not been charged with, et cetera, and so on and so forth. I think that Ezra Miller was very unpopular right now, a very tough person to stake a lead. Even if nothing had gone wrong with the last year and a half of misadventure, I think people generally, they're not a star. Ezra Miller's not a star, not an A-lister of any sort. You know, you have to kind of be into a very idiosyncratic performance to get there. And that's the leading person of this movie. You know, it's really tough to have gone through a gigantic epoch shift in Warner Brothers, you know, between the sale of Warner Brothers, between Zaslav coming in, between new management, and then just bundling all this shit up and saying, we're going to get rid of the Batgirl movie. You know, we're going to write all this stuff off. And then James Gunn's going to come in, essentially invalidating the last two movies of this whole franchise if they're going to move Beetle into the next group. That's a strange phenomenon, but
he announced us the first in the new DCU.
Right, but at the same time, Gunn was sticking his neck out and saying that, you know, The Flash was one of the best movies he's ever seen come out of DC. So we clearly know that he's doing some marketing work there. Nobody believes that, you know. But I think for reasons we'll get into later, I'm not entirely convinced that audiences can accept a project that stands alone from a continuity. I think there's plenty of examples of that not happening. I think that it had more to do with the fact that this was just warmed over leftovers. This was refried beans. This was stuff that people didn't want in the first place. It was the wrong time. The moment left the market, and just a whole bunch of features, colluded, a confluence of things to make this a giant bomb. It's amazing how something can make $60 million and still be considered a bomb. But yeah, that's what we're talking about right now. That's the world we live in.
Well, they've been overspending, and my big theory for 2023 is that this is the year where the $100 million movie makes a big comeback, whether that's Mario or John Wick or Oppenheimer or Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Like, the days of spending 200 or 300 million on a superhero movie, I feel like if it's Superman, go for it. The Flash is kind of a little bit more for the diehards, and I worry, or not worry, I think we're starting to see the superhero trend becoming maintaining its appeal for the diehards, but perhaps less so for the casuals. Because on to my next question: Black Adam, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and The Flash together make 3 flops in a row for DC. Some have blamed the upcoming reset of the DC universe as a major cause, and James Gunn obviously has already announced that Blue Beetle will be the first movie in the new DC universe, which just seems like a marketing ploy. But we got Aquaman 2 in December, and then a long break before Superman Legacy in 2025. So prediction time. When December 2023 rolls around, will we be talking about the number of DC flops in a row being 5? Or should those just go straight to max, save money on the marketing if they're doomed to fail no matter what?
Last part first. I think they should just punt. Go for the gate. Go for the back fence. No, they should come out theatrical. It was a fiasco what they did with Batgirl, not Batwoman was the TV show. Batgirl was the movie. That was an absolute fiasco. I think that looked worse than it will probably save them in terms of the tax write-down. No, they should put these in the theaters, spend the marketing money, stand by the decision, see if you can get a W out of these L's somehow. But to that point, though, I do think that these projects are all going to look like cast-offs. They all look like orphans left on doorsteps in baskets with a note tied to the blanket. And that's a deadly combination. I don't think that they're going to be able to, high step outside of that perception issue where everything just looks like it's yesterday's news, fish wrapped up in newspaper. So I think that, it's 2 things that are inevitable, is that they just have no choice but to take a loss on these things. But I also think that they should stand up to them. The other thing was that I believe The Flash was the first movie that Zaslav said, no, we're owning this. This was, the other ones were the previous administration. He took this over. He put his faith.
I think Zaslav said it was the best superhero movie he'd ever seen.
Yeah. And Zaslav's idea of an old movie is probably Ordinary People. I have no doubt that the guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. But no, I say theatrical, but I think that, we are going to have I think they're gone. How could you possibly get a win out of these last few movies?
It might be petty, but the moment I heard somebody say Batman's a fascist in the Blue Beetle trailer, irrespective of the context, it's like, I want to hear somebody say Batman's the coolest superhero of all time. I want to hear somebody say, I think Batman's a sexy motherfucker. I want to hear that Batman's an icon. The moment you start saying Batman's a fascist, I'm like, you know what? I think I'll keep my $20. But Aquaman 2, I'm embarrassed to admit it. I saw Aquaman 1 twice in the theater. I enjoyed Aquaman. I like James Wan. I will be back for Aquaman 2 with a smile on my face. But we have a super chat here. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, don't forget that Black Adam went all in on making Batman a hero. That kid in his bedroom had posters of Batman all over the place.
Yeah, but that kid was the most annoying character in the movie. I hated that kid.
Yes, that's true.
I wanted to see Black Adam just squash him as opposed to befriend him. So yeah, let Black Adam be a villain. But I've got a super chat here from Mr. Mackenzie Lambert, frequent contributor to Wrong Reel, but he writes, if DC wanted to be a true alternative to Marvel, they should have theatrically released their superior animated movies. And then that would have minimized MCU comparisons since the animated films had their own expanded universe. Yeah, hindsight being 2020, now seeing how Into and Across the Spider-Verse have done so well, imagine if you took something like Justice League Dark, Apocalypse War, but gave it more of a budget, more production value, released that bad boy in the theater. I just rewatched it last night. I went down a bit of a DC rabbit hole. It's like, this is so goddamn cool where you get to see all your favorite characters either like reimagined as servants of Darkseid and or just getting butchered by the servants of Darkseid. It was so badass, so hardcore. I would gladly pay to see movies like Apocalypse War in the theater. But where do you stand on the DC animated movies?
Well, they've had a consistent level of quality from Jump. It's like they You know, whereas Marvel slash Disney was treating their animated stuff as you know, byproduct stuff they needed to put out there because people expect to see animated movies with the likenesses of the characters not being there and voice alikes. You know, DC never treated it that way. I mean, they had Dwayne McDuffie running the narrative side until he died a bunch of years back, and he, you know, was really intent on making it something that stood alone. And they adapted the stories from the comic books more so than the movies do. They were a lot more faithful in many cases. But the thing is that the few that I watched clearly didn't have the budget of, say, Into the Spider-Verse. They were at a certain tier, but it wasn't quite theatrical tier. Now, the question is, should they have spent more money? I think they had a good system. They were really in creative control. You know, that the people who were in charge of those really got to dictate, you know, figure drawings, the actual shape, the style, the narrative, the tone. There was, I think, a lot less distance between the finished product and what the creators intended, as opposed to the feature film aspect. A lot of marketers and a lot of people who are in management positions get a say in what you see. I think there's a lot more directness in terms of what the animated movie was. You'd lose that if it was feature, because all of a sudden you have a lot more on the line.
Yeah, I saw one of them in the theater. It was like a small limited release. I think it was maybe the one with the Doomsday where he kills Superman. But I remember going over to the Union Square Theater here a couple blocks away, and I walked in there and I looked around at the crowd. I was like, oh, these are the real DC fans, the hardcore fans, the unapologetic, like the guys who have like long boxes like stacked underneath their bed. And it was so refreshing just to be around like the true nerds who have read thousands upon thousands of comics, who really love this stuff. And I feel like a lot of those DC animated movies really stay like true to the spirit and the heart and the intentions of those original comics in ways where the movies are just playing a different game. They're playing a bigger game. They're trying to go for a much wider audience. But I wouldn't mind it if we saw some of these movies where the budgets came down and they tried to have just much more laser-like focus on appealing to the biggest nerds in the land. But moving on to my next question, let's switch gears for a second and look at the entire DCEU slate overall. And I'm going to be doing a poll here in a sec for some of the people watching. But for me, it's a mixed bag. Very few classic superhero flicks, but the one that I find myself returning to most frequently is James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. I realized the other day, in the last 10 years, that's the big budget movie that I've seen more times than any other, even more so than like Mad Max Fury Road. But it's one of my favorite R-rated superhero movies ever made. But for you, what is the biggest home run of the entire 10-year stretch? And why has Warner Brothers struggled so much to maintain any quality control?
Okay, good questions. The biggest home run, without a doubt to me, is Wonder Woman. And I'll qualify this by saying I did not love Wonder Woman, but I think it was the most successful at what this was all supposed to be. Wonder Woman was Patty Jenkins, who hadn't been in the game. And I mean, this was the biggest shot she had for a good couple of years. She's a good director, real solid person. Again, who knows how much of what DC let the directors do and how much is animatic teams designing things beforehand. Look, Wonder Woman had a terrible final frame. It was nonsensical. It had nothing to do with the movie that preceded it. But I think that they really established a tone that the movies before that hadn't. They were trying to. I think Gal Gadot was the exact right person to play Wonder Woman. I think that she dove into the role with a gusto that few other actors that were cast in this franchise had for their particular part. And it was a movie built on hope. It was in the correct period of time. They were able to exploit World War I. I mean, there were just so many aspects of that movie. It also had an ensemble to spread around the acting, so for some real talented guys, like Chris Pine and people like that. And so I think that Wonder Woman winds up doing a lot of things that Man of Steel intended to do, but I don't think Zack Snyder could get over the line. But I think that's The Suicide Squad was too little too late. That wasn't enough to redefine the line, but that was certainly, I think, the most technically perfect movie. That was sort of the most technically well acquitted of the films. They had the best voice. It's clear that there was a sharpshooter as a director who got the chance to do a lot of his decision making. You saw his fingerprints all over the project, which you did not see for the rest, except for Zack Snyder. You did not see that kind of care of the creator in many of the other projects across the line.
All right, I'm going to do a poll, and the poll is going to be best DCEU content. And here are the options so far. I'm going to let you pick the fourth. Snyder's trilogy. Second choice is Wonder Woman. Third choice is The Suicide Squad. What should be the fourth option before I launch the poll?
Peacemaker.
Oh, good choice. All right, Peacemaker. All right, so boom, first poll I've ever done on this channel. Let's see how it goes. Boom, 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 and I can end the poll after everybody's had a chance to think of it. And if I left something out, just let us know and just scream at me, etc., and so forth. All right, so while that goes,
up, we're adding up.
Very nice. All right, very cool. Okay, so let's get nasty and discuss the failures of the DCEU. For my money, Shazam, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 1984, and Shazam Fury of the Gods are all unwatchable. And I couldn't even finish Wonder Woman 1984 or Fury of the Gods. I turned both of them off. But for you, which film is the biggest loser of the DCEU, and what were the long-term negative impacts on the overall brand of DC?
That's interesting. You know what? I feel like you left out to me, there's like a clear runaway, loser and all this stuff. And that's Suicide Squad by David Ayer. I think because what year was that? 2014?
16.
16. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking, I'll tell you why I didn't include it in the list, and I've got a 3-second shot to tell you why I didn't include it.
What?
I know people say it's misogynistic and reprehensible and grotesque, et cetera, and so forth. When that came out, and that trailer came out, before the movie came out, I went to Comic-Con, and there must have been 10,000 people, male, female, young, old, fat, skinny, all shapes and sizes, dressed as Harley Quinn. That look took off like a rocket, and they're all carrying hammers and baseball bats. And so while Suicide Squad was a catastrophe that got re-edited and the whole ending, which is a mess, at a minimum, it gave us Margot Robbie as Harley, and I liked her more in the Suicide Squad, but Suicide Squad, it had its moments.
It had that one moment. I mean, that's a phenomenon that came out of that movie. Because again, it's so long ago now. I don't think people are quite aware of exactly how fucked up a phenomenon that actually did happen behind the scenes with Suicide Squad. Like, everybody knows the movie was terrible. It had very few defenders, very few supporters. Just to reiterate very quickly.
But those trailers were a viral sensation. The initial tease with the eyes, I started a joke, which was supposed to just be the Comic-Con one. And then you had the Bohemian Rhapsody trailer. People lost their fucking minds. And I rewatched those trailers last night. They're still good 7 years later.
And those are the things that actually wound up killing the movie in the end, because those trailers were designed by there's a trailer firm called Trailer Park. They're on Hollywood and Highland. My friend used to work there. He was a cutter there, and so I kind of heard about all this stuff secondhand. Is that DC went there? That was one of their big accounts, and they managed to blow the doors off of DC by essentially taking David Ayer's raw footage and making those two pop master trailers out of those things. They went nuts. They were incredibly viral, and the thing is that at that point, DC's, or I should say Warner's management, started to have no confidence in what David Ayer was doing in the edit booth. So they did something that's never been done before. They took all the footage, they brought it to Hollywood and Highland, and they said to the trailer cutting, they said, can you do for the entire film what you did for the trailer? It has never been done before. That is so unprecedented. That's crazy.
David Ayer, I'm sure, was like, you realize I'm a director and I've got features to my name and I've got experience making feature films. Like, nope, we want the entire movie to be one big trailer.
Here's what's fucking fascinating. If you look on Reddit, there's no shortage of AMAs that David Ayer did where he talks about, as much as he can. I don't know how many NDAs he signed or just how much he wants to let the past go by. But he has a right to be upset by what they did to Suicide Squad. And he will tell as much as the first 40 minutes of the movie was the worst. It was the scene he feels got cut out of it. Like, it did not in any way, shape, or form resemble the thing that he made. And I don't think David Ayer's an ace or anything like that. The guy, as far as I'm concerned, I like Fury. He's got kind of one good movie under his hood as a director.
Yeah, he's got a style of his own. He's not, for me, one of my favorite filmmakers, but I see his movies when they come.
Yeah, but tell me about. I'm curious because I just watched Shazam: Fury of the Gods, and I watched the first Shazam when it came out. How does that inspire such antipathy in you? Because I just sort of found them as such, middle of the road, nothing movies. They didn't.
Yeah, because they're designed for 3-year-old children, and I want to see. Well, speaking of what I want to see, the kind of shit I want to see in my DC universe is like this. I want to see Idris Elba moving his head as John Cena's jizz hits the side of his helmet. I don't want to see a bunch of children running around having stupid, like little kind of fairy tale adventures, which is exactly what those Shazam movies are. So maybe I'm just a mean, bitter, perverted old bastard, but I have buying power. I buy comics. I like buying comics. I like watching movies. And so, yeah, my vote counts just as much as a 6-year-old child.
And before we jump off to the subject, I was really curious because I think that one of the giant elephants in the room, I mean, we're going to talk about it anyway, is the Justice League 2017 to Zack Snyder's Justice League transmogrification.
Yeah,
So, I mean, now we're
2021,
yeah. So we are, I mean, we're a couple of years out of that project now. How do you look back on that phenomenon of Joss Whedon finishing it and then Snyder getting his own giant mega budget?
Well, there are a lot of questions along these lines, but I feel like anytime a studio is going through musical chairs or a movie is going through musical chairs with a lot of different people with the ability to make major sweeping decisions, you've got a problem. I know, like with Jeff Johns, and was it Peter Berg or John Berg, his partner in crime, who briefly came in to oversee DC. They immediately got fired. They brought in Walter Hamada. But yeah, switching directors, you're always playing with fire. And I guess the biggest legacy for me for the Zack Snyder films is I feel like no one's ever done a better job of showing godlike combat in the superhero genre, whether that's the trailer for Man of Steel, which I still love and adore, which gives me chills, or the scene where Wonder Woman and Superman are fighting Doomsday, or the scene where we see Darkseid fighting the Atlanteans and the Amazonians and the Greek gods and a Green Lantern. All that shit is so godlike and so killer. However, my biggest grievance against the Snyder films is I think he pays much more attention to his visuals and very little attention to the written word. The screenplays are a mess. They're overly busy. They're overly convoluted. Like Batman v Superman had killer scenes, but it had a dreadful screenplay. It's like, cut all the talking out and just give us the jizz shots, because that's why we're here. Give us the jizz shots and I'll be a happy Zack Snyder fan. So I love what he brings to the table, like the warehouse scene with Batman, but his screenplays are dreadful. But maybe I'm alone. Where do you stand?
I think Zack Snyder, you know, like he blew the shot for me when Man of Steel came out. I think I got the impression that, like you said, Zack Snyder is a visual stylist, and he was really at home doing advertising and music videos. And I mean, his feature film work has been up and down depending on who he gets to be as a screenwriter. You know, I still think his best shot out was Dawn of the Dead, and that was a script by James Gunn of all people too, ironically. But I think that he proved himself to be kind of illiterate when it came to Superman. And, you know, like you say, the idea of gods on Earth, gods on film, gods on Earth depicted on film, that was absolutely what he was intending to do. And I believe that. And he might have been one of the best people who was prepared to acquit that on film. But
to do the Kirby crackle, so to speak.
But I think that thematically, though, he was completely tone deaf. He had no ability to punch through the character. He was not able to wrangle his actors. He was not able to get performances and sort of give you some texture behind the visuals. And, you know, like Man of Steel, there's so many moments where I just watched it and said he absolutely does not understand. He may think he knows what this version of Superman is, but all he's doing is proving that he has no idea what the character of Superman is. Because
I like the fight scenes of Man of Steel, and I don't like the rest.
I thought, you know, everything about General Zod and but I mean, even Kevin Costner waving his hand and saying, "No, son, don't save me from the tornado."
You give me post-traumatic stress. Yeah.
Just saying, man.
So much about the DCEU does give you post-traumatic stress, even remembering
from Jump. Just from Jump, yeah.
All right, but just so we know where we stand with the first poll. So Snyder's trilogy won with 38%. Wonder Woman lost with 11%. Interesting. Peacemaker 16%. The Suicide Squad coming in with a very respectable second with 33%. That is interesting because, once again, every time I talk to a DC fan or feel like I have my finger on the pulse of what DC fans want, I realize, we all want different things. And I feel like the good and the bad of what Warner Brothers has done is they've given us a lot of DC content, animation shows and movies to choose from, some within the official continuity, some without. But it also has splintered the audience, where somebody like, all I want is Matt Reeves' Batman. Give me more of that. Or somebody like, all I want is Todd Phillips' Joker. Give me more of that. How can all these kind of coexist peacefully? Which leads me to my question with Joker 2, Batman Brave and the Bold, and the Batman 2 all coming our way. Will there continue to be brand confusion for DC, where casual fans are divided and split over what vision of DC they prefer? And if Joker 2 or Batman 2 become smash hits, should they be incorporated into James Gunn's plans for a shared universe?
I think we already have the answer to this one. And, frankly, it lines up with how I wish things would be. Joker was what? Was that $1 billion hit or somewhere close
It's the
to it?
most. I think it's the most profitable superhero movie of like the last decade because they made it
One
for
of
like
those,
50 million and it grossed $1 billion.
yeah, one of those probably rated R movies on top of it.
Yeah,
And Best Actor Oscar for Joaquin Phoenix.
yeah.
But I think Joker answers the questions that if people are continuing to look past it and not get the meaning from it, then that's, we'll be tied he. But Joker proves that you can have two different properties in the same universe that that are not continuity dependent. I could even go back and say Superman 1, Superman 2, Superman 3 and 4 to some degree. These movies were independent of one another. Like they came out, there was themes that they shared. They shared an actor, but I mean, they weren't really dependent on what happened beforehand, other than the reference of General Zod in the beginning scene of the original Dick Donner Superman. Those movies stood apart from one another. But I mean, more importantly, Joker proved that people are hungry for something that they just want to go see a movie. They don't give a fuck if it's tied in to a larger continuity. So no, then the other part of that answer is I don't see Joaquin Phoenix in the same frame with Robert Pattinson at all. I don't see any of that stuff being that it absolutely works the way it is now. They don't have to change a goddamn thing about it. Likewise, I think Robert Pattinson's universe, Matt Reeves' Batman trilogy, presumed Batman trilogy, is also going to stand alone. That too made what 700 million or so. It's way the fuck up there. It's got a vote of confidence. And they promised Matt Reeves a trilogy, or at least they asked him to come in the door with a trilogy plan. That was when they were getting all the directors to do a dance. You needed to come in there and pitch a trilogy. And so I think they're going to let him, sail that right through. Presumably, if the next two are going to be successes, but I don't see these things being brought in, and I think that'd be a gigantic mistake if they did, because this is the one bright spot Warner's has to fall back on, and they can't fuck that up now.
All righty. Well, here's a super chat from Adrian Mendoza. Thank you very much. He says, love you guys. Keep it up. Adrian, we love you too. And thanks for the do-re-mi. And it'll go right into making donations for memberships. And if anybody's joined this this live stream kind of halfway through, I am going to be experimenting with live streams for members moving forward, but I'm going to be paying for all the memberships. They're just 99 cents a month. But until I figure out whether or not people like them or if they're worth doing, I'm just going to kind of finance that whole excursion. But let's start getting some questions from Twitter, and then we'll start diving into the chat itself. So we got a question from @JoeBritches on Twitter. He writes, one thing I hope you'll address is the unrealistic expectations WB had. If you look at the box office for Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, and Aquaman, there was steady growth. Had they stuck with the Snyder plan, WB would have made more money than what they did by abandoning it. And just to piggyback on that, I know like Adam Rakoff's talked about this quite a few times where they lost faith in the vision before they even really had a chance to kind of test the market with it, because when Batman v Superman did not gross $1 billion, everybody had their oh shit moment and started clenching their sphincters. But what do you think? Should they have stuck to their guns for a few more movies, or am I missing something here?
Well, I think that one of the problems was that real life happened to Snyder, in his family. He suffered a personal setback that derailed his career for sure. And, he was the godfather of this whole thing. And if you pull him out of it, you just essentially have, an ant farm that you knock over and all the ants are running around on your desk. And faith would have been nice, but I don't think reality dictated, you could do that at that point. That the situation had changed. Like you said, Batman versus Superman did not gross $1 billion. So they started to panic because they wanted immediate $1 billion grossers. And I would even go so far as to say, if you roll it back, keep in mind that Batman versus Superman was 30% the screenplay, 30% thereabouts, 40% the screenplay to Superman 2, Man of Steel 2, which was supposed to take place. And then they did an extensive gut of that script just to have something to announce at Comic-Con that year, when they had Harry Lennox, I think, was up on stage and made the announcement about that. And they showed the logo and everyone went nuts. And that's what made Warner's think, oh, we did the right thing. We're not going to do Man of Steel 2. We're going to jump right into the giant multiverse concept. We're going to introduce 16 characters in the next movie. Some things may have succeeded for a little while. I think they had some excitement about it. I don't think it was going to be continual. I just don't think they had that kind of luck up their sleeve ongoing. And like I said, ultimately it doesn't matter, because Snyder pulling out of it, them, bringing in Joss Whedon, the actual antonym of that, it begs the question, what would the 2017 version of Justice League had looked like if Zack Snyder could have closed the deal? It wouldn't have resembled the Snyder Cut, obviously, because it would have been 5 hours long. But I don't know. We'll never know. It's just speculative thinking.
Absolutely. All right. Well, one more question from Jack Martin, aka at JMartin578 on Twitter. He writes, there has to be a documentary made one day about the BTS drama of the DCEU. I totally agree. Just think about everything that's happened since Man of Steel came out. The running of the DCEU is probably the biggest mismanagement of popular IP ever in movie history. So I just want to piggyback on top of this with my own question. Let's pretend all these franchises are like stocks in a portfolio where you have to buy more, sell it all, or hold. Like an example would be like Nintendo, I'm a buy, John Wick, I'm a buy. But when it comes to DC, knowing what you know about James Gunn's future plans for Superman and other filmmakers who might be dabbling in that fictional setting, is DC moving forward a buy, sell, or hold?
I think it's going to be a buy, and I'll tell you why. First of all, you referenced earlier in the show the fact that there is a lag time between Superman Legacy. Is it 2025, I think? First quarter 2025 or summer 2025. I forget when that's supposed to come out. Yeah, there's a big sprint between that and that. Actually, which indicates that to me, I think James Gunn has enough time to do the job correctly. They're in casting Superman right now. Apparently, the three guys they have in contention, Nicholas Hoult is one of them, and he's the guy I'd prefer if they're seriously talking about it. I'd say give Superman to a good actor and let him be a good actor. And James Gunn knows what he's doing with good actors. He can actually run good actors. So I think by that point, the heat will be off of it. The expectations may be a little lower. I don't know. It's hard to tell, but I do think that starting with Superman, with this guy, with the proper Superman, with a really worked script, and enough time to get the job done, I feel like Superman Legacy is going to surprise people. So I would say that's like a secret buy. Let's see how.
I wish instead of launching a new DCU, instead what he would do, I was thinking about this all morning. What if he brought back Henry Cavill and instead just dove right into Kingdom Come and used that to completely, totally destroy and wipe clean the entire DCEU, and then you could really kind of rebuild from the ashes, from ground zero. That's what they did with Apocalypse War, the cartoon. They destroyed everything so they could have a fresh jumping on point.
Right.
And I feel like, I mean, the Flash is becoming that, salting of the earth phenomenon unintentionally. But I wish they did a giant epic where everybody got to die. And I feel like Kingdom Come would be a great example of that. But we have a super chat here from an American werewolf in New Jersey. Everybody check out his YouTube channel. He was nice enough to invite me on to talk about Werewolf by Night last fall. But he writes, hey, who decides that every comic book movie needs to make $1 billion? Otherwise, it's a flop. Is that the studios or just YouTubers who want Hollywood to tank? Snyder will be back, by the way. I mean, Snyder has already been back. He's already working with Netflix. Like, Snyder's future is secure. He'll be making movies the rest of his life. I think the movies have to make $1 billion when they cost $250 to make. But wind the clock back to 2015, Deadpool, I think it had a budget of like 55 or 60, and it made like 500 or 600. It was one of the biggest successes of that era, and people loved it and adored it. And people are going to be excited for Deadpool 3 and that sort of thing. So I think they do have to make $1 billion when the budgets balloon totally out of proportion. But where do you stand? Like, what is the healthy model for superhero flicks moving forward?
James, I don't know if you remember, I think it was 2009, 2008 or so, and a couple of earnings calls from the studios, or it was an intent. It was sort of a published intent. I don't know if it was a white paper or something of that like, but they said outright they were going to abandon mid-budget movies entirely. They were going to go the landscape we have right now, where they cratered the middle class of filmmaking and have just, as you like to say, tadpoles and tentpoles.
Yeah,
it was going to be either Fox Searchlight or Spider-Man: Homecoming and nothing in between. They said outright that's what they were going for, and that's when you get Transformers. That's when you start to get this sort of epochal shift in big budget filmmaking with incredible crazy ass budgets. Guys like Bay, not doing movies like Pain and Gain anymore, but essentially just doing Transformers movies and things of that like. So they intended.
Even Disney used to make mid-budget movies. Now they make live action remakes of animated movies. They make Disney princess movies. They make like Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars. But Disney used to make tons of mid-budget movies, but not anymore. Now it's people like A24. And admittedly, their latest Ari Aster experiment was a flop, but it was like a $30-35 million movie, which for A24 was the biggest movie they'd ever made.
Yeah, Disney used to have Touchstone, and Disney still owns Touchstone, and apparently the word Touchstone does get on some movies in the front, but it used to be an imprimatur of the kind of work that they would do, much the same way as Fox Searchlight was, an imprimatur of the actual mentality of what they would. I just watched The Brothers McMullen again the other day, and that's a Fox Searchlight movie. Perfect example of a Fox Searchlight movie from 1995, something you pluck out of festival obscurity and you make, I don't know, Brothers McMullen made something like $30 million. It was a crazy success, but those were the go-go 90s. But once they decided that a movie, like, we're going to actively swing for $1 billion, and once they decided, they kind of cracked the formula on how to make $1 billion, and they consistently made multi-billion-dollar movies every year for a good number of years in a row until the luck ran out only recently. So
but people forget
that was a conscious
the early
decision.
days of. But people forget that in the early days of Marvel, they were not all billion-dollar movies. There were plenty of movies that made a couple $100 million, and that was fine. But I got a question here from Mr. Sky Wingfield, our mutual friend from Film 89, the Welshman. It's a two-part question. He writes, I think giving us the Batman instead of a standalone Affleck Batman film was a missed opportunity and an unnecessary step outside the DCEU continuity. What are the main creative decisions you'd have done differently with the DCEU? That's part one. Then part two, in recent years, we've seen so many franchises creatively running to the ground: Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, and Indiana Jones, to name but a few. What are the main reasons that you cite for such a widespread epidemic of creative dumbfuckery? Now, with this live stream, I want to try to keep things focused on DC, and we can do future live streams about Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Indiana, all that stuff. But let's start with part one. What are the main creative decisions you'd have done differently with the DCEU?
Yeah, I think that a Batman solo movie in the universe, at least Man of Steel 2 is what I would have done first. Then a Batman solo movie. Then you can start doing the kind of bring the gang together, because I think you could have rolled out a few more superheroes in Man of Steel 2, and even a few more. It could have been a Flash and Batman story. Essentially, what the Flash was, you could have collated a lot of that stuff in Batman, Dark Knight, or whatever the fuck you would have called it, and then a Dawn of Justice, and then a Justice League. It moved quickly. It moved too quickly at a breakneck pace, and it was incoherent. What you got was the product of screenwriters like Chris Terrio, people who, I don't know where the fuck that guy came from, but all of a sudden his credits were on everything that was terrible. And I don't want to blame the guy for decisions he didn't make, but I'm associating his name with terrible, terrible movies. And no screenwriter wants that, unless you're Akiva Goldsman, who you've consciously set out to make
loves writing terrible movies. He made a very successful career over the last quarter century out of writing terrible movies and shows. And yeah, it's funny how there's so few brand name screenwriters that we know of where we love their stuff. Like once upon a time, you'd have like the Robert Towns of the world. But now everybody knows the horrible writers by name, specifically people like Akiva Goldsman. They become celebrities. And it's like, I guess it's good that the screenwriting trade is getting that additional attention, but I wish it was getting attention for marvelous screenplays, like people like Paul Schrader and whatnot. But that was just a different time period. All righty. Well, let's do another poll. And I'm thinking we should do a poll for what is the crummiest movie in the DC. So while you start to elaborate on, to use Sky's words, where he said, what are the main reasons you cite for such a widespread epidemic of creative dumbfuckery? Was the epidemic of creative dumbfuckery part of the DC EU? So elaborate on that while I write up a new poll over here with my new favorite toy.
I can do that. No problem talking. So I think what the issue is with these movies is that someone made a very well-reasoned argument that this type of filmmaking that you're seeing now, especially movies like Ant-Man, I'm jumping to other comic book movies, and Flash in particular, they've transformed themselves into like personal movies. They're movies that are about people's felt experiences. Whether that's successful or not is one thing. I know this is especially a case you can make with Pixar films right now, but again, we'll kick that to another argument down the road. But I think that you have the impulse inside the giant studios is to make a film like Flash based on the human experience of what Barry Allen goes through, cast through this actor that you thought, oh, this young person is going to cement that feeling, and we're gonna lean with that. But also, I think that the culture of dumbfuckery is, laser being shot out of every single C-suite office at the same time. Every marketer in DC, every senior VP gets a chance to rewrite the script, gets a chance to be heard. And these are people
they got to justify their salaries. Yeah.
They're fucking MBAs. Look, and there's a
I'm an MBA. Don't harsh on MBAs, but
there are other MBAs besides you. But I'm saying it's like we're in a real fallow period with movie marketing, and no disrespect intended to our friends who are movie marketers, because they're very good at their job and they know exactly how to do it. It's just that they're kept from doing it in an effective way, because movie marketing isn't not about the canniness of the marketers. It's about some other decisions that are on an executive level. And that's why trailers spill every single thing that you see in a movie. There's no more plot. There's no more secrets reserved in trailers anymore. Collateral. There are a
few rare exceptions. but they're rare. I mean, usually the movie's a stinker, so they have to overshare to lure you in.
Yeah.
If the movie's a masterpiece, well, they can keep their cards close to their chest because they
While
know everybody's
watching,
mind's
yeah,
gonna be blown.
while watching Flash, it occurs to me it's like, oh, this whole Michael Keaton aspect was totally blown. I got
Yeah.
all the feeling of this from the trailer. I almost didn't get any of it from the feature itself. Not Michael Keaton did a good job, but it's like the trick was the reveal, and the reveal had been done months ago, and we all celebrated on Twitter a long time ago. By the time I saw the movie, it was done. It had been spent, and there was nothing left to do because the
Yeah, I
movie
think all
was
the early
marketed.
fan screenings, in hindsight, were a mistake. So when I realized as I was putting together my poll for worst DCEU movie, I only get 4 options for a poll, and there are probably more than 4 options that should have been included. I went with Suicide Squad 2016, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 1984. But I apologize if somebody feels like there is another stinker that should have been included. I've only got 4 options. But right now, Suicide Squad is pulling ahead. So yeah, a lot of hate for the 2016 film. So
Yeah, it was a fucking mess, man. I'm telling you.
all right, well, I'm going to start scrolling through some of the chat and try to get some of these comments in here as well. I've still got some of my own questions as well, but I'm going to start with Andre Villafranca. He writes, not going to lie, here only to recommend some manga. Bring on the manga recommendations. I love manga recommendations. That's one of my big blind spots where every once in a while I'll read a good one, like Uzumaki and things like that. But I haven't read nearly as many manga as I would like to. I've seen a lot of animation, but I haven't done my due diligence as far as the reading is concerned. Matthias says time ran out for the Flash, but the Flash, it's going to go down as perhaps there's a chance it might be the biggest money loser of the year, but I think that distinction is going to belong to Dial of Destiny. But we'll have to wait a week or two to figure out just how much of a debacle that might be. Boom, 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 boom. Cheryl Yera says DCU R.I.P. Actually, the DCU is coming soon, summer 2025. It's the DCEU, which I think Jim Lee was actually the first person to coin that phrase. But yeah, Fred Schaefer says, made it, glad to be here to mourn the DCEU. So let me move on to some of my final questions for you. All right, so here. I've heard it said that nearly everyone who works with DC comes to regret it. I don't completely buy that. James Gunn seems to be making a go of it. I think Gal Gadot's stardom increased dramatically by playing Wonder Woman. But in your opinion, whose career suffered the most long-term damage from working within the DCEU, and who walked away with their dignity and artistic integrity intact?
Well, maybe it's not fair, but the whole Ray Fisher, Joss Whedon thing doesn't look very good, and neither of those guys have really got back on the horse since then.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not Ray Fisher's fault. He was not good in the movie, or both movies, I should say, and he didn't have a good experience. He hated it, and I haven't really seen what he's done after this. So there's that. And Joss Whedon, clearly wasn't intended to be there from the start, but his career also didn't kind of come back. I mean, he's having his own personal crisis because his reputation has taken this giant slam. He's been revealed to be a giant sleazebag. But the movie, I don't think that the charges from the set really helped him out either. But if we're sticking strictly professionally, I think watching those really sad-ass pictures of Affleck, with his back to the door and the cigarette in his mouth, and just his marriage cratered during this, his sobriety cratered during this, and it's like I can't blame shooting Batman versus Superman and then Justice League back to back. It's not the reason for that, but it really is compelling to look at a man's personal life dissolving. Now, thank God, I like him a lot. I've always liked him, and it's like he looks like he's got himself back on track again. So I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, Air. He made that movie for 90 million, sold it to Amazon for like 130. It's like, if you're getting to make a character-driven movie with no action or special effects for 90 million, well, then that is the dream that most filmmakers aspire to, not to work in franchises and make original IP passion projects. So I think slam dunk, Ben Affleck's back on firm footing.
Yeah, but I think that there are a couple of actors that really owe their cachet to this, the whole, the first starting with the Snyderverse and then translating into the DCEU. I think I'll bring up Gal Gadot again. Is that I don't think she's a good actor. I think the trailer for that new stupid Netflix movie looks awful. She looks terrible in it. I don't think she can act. It looks like she can barely string together sentences. However, I think she was a fantastic Wonder Woman. I don't know why it works. I think she looks great in the costume. She really takes the whole thing serious. The way Linda Carter took it seriously, she understood what she looks like and what people think of when young girls see that. She embodies.
She has her moments. Like when she's fighting Doomsday, at one point, Doomsday smacks her like 100 yards, and she turns around and she smiles before rushing back in. I was like, fuck yeah, that is totally badass. Of course, she would smile. She's enjoying the challenge of fighting this mythological godlike creature because that's what Wonder Woman does.
You know the way Johnny Depp used to show up in sick wards of hospitals in the Jack Sparrow costume back when he was doing those 3 Pirates movies. It was a real relish. He honestly, he was at the point in his career. You know, I don't know how you feel about Johnny Depp, everybody, but go with me on this one. He was at the point in his career where he looked at people and he saw the joy that these fucking sick kids in these cancer wards were seeing Jack Sparrow would walk in, and he bought it. He sucked it up. He just drank it up. He loved it. And Gal Gadot's the same thing. She knew what she looked like to young girls, and I think she's the mother of I think 2 young girls. And so there was a real connection, real kinship with that icon, with that costume. She got it. And, you know, the one thing I would say is that Henry Cavill also got a giant boost off of this. But I think if you listen to what the scuttlebutt, what has been with Henry Cavill since he made these movies, his ego apparently has, I mean, this is just gossip. I love luxuriating gossip, though. But apparently he was a nightmare to deal with on The Witcher, which is one of the reasons why that show, they parted ways, and it was not amicable. And apparently he was very difficult.
I would have a different point of view that the moment they decided not to adapt The Witcher and decided to make it their own show, that's when the problem started. Because he's a giant video game nerd, and he read all the books in preparation. He's like, oh, like, as to quote Martin Kessler, why do the thing if you're not going to do the thing? Which seems to happen all the time now, where, oh, we're going to make, you know, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Oh, are we going to make a movie that's going to appeal to the Indiana Jones fans? No, we're not going to do. Are you crazy? We're going to take it in a completely different direction for this imaginary fan base that doesn't exist. And then they get mad when people don't want to go see it. I think the same thing happened with The Witcher. They did the thing without doing the thing. So yeah, words of wisdom from the great one.
Who do you think suffered the most from this? Quickly, then. I'm really curious what your impression was.
Who suffered the most from the DCEU?
Association as an actor or creator performer from being in this whole thing.
I think The Rock has taken a hit to his career. I think The Rock, he thought he was going to be the biggest celeb and the biggest hero and the biggest star of the DCEU. And what he wanted was to do a follow-up to Black Adam, where it's basically Black Adam versus the DC universe. I would have gone. I would have fucking enjoyed it. Like, for me, Black Adam reminded me, like, the good parts reminded me of like an early 90s Image comic. All splash pages, all lightning, all action. Very little substance, but it was, you know, style, and it was good fun with a terrible screenplay. But I enjoyed Dr. Fate, and I enjoyed Hawkman. I enjoyed a bunch of the characters that were in it. But I think The Rock, the fact that he's gone, I won't say crawling back to the Fast and the Furious franchise, but he's going back to the Fast and the Furious franchise. He wouldn't have done that if he'd been coming out of Black Adam from a position of strength.
I think that's true. That's a very accurate read on it too. But, you know, he dug that hole for himself by no longer being, you know, his whole stipulation was, I can't be beaten. I can't be vulnerable. I need to be this ineffaceable character. And that's fucking boring. And that's not what you want from Dwayne Johnson, for Christ's sake.
Well, he can be beaten. He just needs to fight Captain Marvel. I refuse to call him Shazam. The character is fucking Captain Marvel. It was Captain Marvel in the 40s. And obviously Marvel's a bunch of their own Captain Marvels, but Captain Marvel says Shazam. You should not call him Shazam. But anyway, they are natural adversaries. And it's just absurd that we got a Shazam 2 where he didn't fight fucking Black Adam. And so once again, these are people who just do not care about the comics art. So here's the results of the poll from the worst movie in the DCEU. Coming in at number 1, Wonder Woman, 1984. Yeah, I concur. That movie fucking sucked balls. Suicide Squad 2016 at 35%. Birds of Prey at 17%. Shazam! Fear of the Gods at 7%. And I imagine there are 1 or 2 movies that probably also should have been included in that list, but I just did not have room. But how does that track for you?
Yeah, no, that works fine. I just have this impulse. I want to talk, and each of us one time again. Tell me one good thing that came out. Give me one more moment of this whole DCEU that you liked. I just want to have an Irish Wake aspect.
Nearly every single scene from the Suicide Squad makes me do cartwheels. I was watching Fury of the Gods the other night, and I was like, this sucks. I'm watching the Suicide Squad again. I saw that 4 times on its opening weekend. I love Peacemaker, how he's actually a villain. He's actually fucking scary. When he tells Ratcatcher 2, I'm thorough. When she asks, like, why kill me? And Ratcatcher 2, my love knows no bounds for Ratcatcher 2. In the moment when she says the city belongs to them and she summons all the rats to attack Starro, so fucking cool. Or just little moments like with Shark King sitting in the back of the van and kind of nodding his head because he can't go into the club. Everybody's dancing. It was like so sad and so pitiful. I love everything about the movie. I love the music. I love the acting. I think Idris Elba has rarely been better. I think that it might be James Gunn's best movie he's ever directed. So Suicide Squad, I think the entire 10-year DCEU was worth it just to give us the Suicide Squad.
Well, could you do me a favor? I sent you a clip in of Superman. Can you play that one?
Oh, let's let her rip. Fuck yeah. All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
bring it on. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go.
For dark side. Not impressed.
Excellent choice, Mr. Scurry. I love that scene as well.
That to me, yeah, you know what? It's like that you had to go through the entire Snyder Cut and all the digressions and all the length and all the weird decompressions. But when you get to that scene, it did not renew the whole movie for me. It didn't pick it up. However, that's the closest I felt to seeing a Jerry Ordway or a Dan Jurgens panel. That was a confidence.
Or a Max Fleischer cartoon brought to life.
Yeah.
He's graceful. Superman should always be graceful. And the fact he casually blows the cold breath up the X, and then when he dodges, it should almost be like an ice skater or a ballerina, because when you watch those Fleischer brother cartoons, he moves like he's water. He's always fluid. And that scene, the way he dodges the punches and everything, that's Superman, 100%. I'm getting goosebumps even remembering it.
When the axe lands and Superman is just there, there's no sort of motion trail. He's just in front of it. It's like, and it just stops. You know, it's like he's quite literally the Man of Steel. And I don't know why it took so much futility, so many hours of watching to get something that resembled the smile on Superman, the confidence. Where was that character before that moment? Why was there not more of that? It should have been that from jump. It should have been at the end of Man of Steel. It should have been nothing boy. But that.
Yeah. My favorite moment of Superman in the entire history of the character on the screen is in the original Richard Donner, when Lois Lane says, "You've got me, but who's got you?" And he just smiles and kind of smirks. He doesn't even respond. He just smiles with total confidence as he's flying up. For me, that is the essence of Superman. Very cool, very calm, very confident, and just nothing but heart and warmth just radiating out of him.
Yeah, I mean, that's 70s filmmaking as opposed to 2010s filmmaking. You get the chance to do that kind of nuance and the kind of actual acting. The thing is, it's like I have such a bad impression of Henry Cavill, but in this one scene, it's like, Jesus, I want more of whatever this particular vitamin Superman was.
Everybody wants more of Henry Cavill. All right, so here's a comment from Adam Sheba. Hope I'm saying your name correctly. I know I've gotten your name incorrect in the past, but I hope I got it right this time. He's got 2 comments. Well, I bet James Gunn's new universe will be very raunchy, considering the early introduction of the Authority. The Authority is basically the boys of DC. And so, yeah, I've got the original Authority trade here, which gets my highest possible recommendation, drawn by Brian Hitch, written by Warren Ellis. Here's my unsolicited advice to the superhero genre. Movies they've kind of run their course over the last 20 years. We're starting to get a little tired of them. They're getting a little stale. The movie superhero genre needs the exact same shot in the arm right now that the comic book industry got in the late 90s, when Warren Ellis, Grant Morrison, Garth Ennis, and all these Alan Moore, all these maniacs were writing some of the coolest superhero comics ever that reinvented the genre. And I feel like a kick-ass Authority movie, whether it's directed by James Gunn or Matthew Vaughn, but somebody irreverent, or take a director out of The Boys who really gets that style. But I feel like right now the time has never been more ripe than for something like the Authority to kind of move in and show everybody how the superhero genre can be done if you abandon all the family-friendly Shazam, Fury of the Gods kind of bullshit.
Well, counterpoint are the boys not already doing that? Does the market have room for 2 dystopian, violent, gory dystopian anti-hero fables?
I think yes, because The Boys only goes halfway. When I watch The Boys, I can tell the writing staff is at war over what direction it should go. There's some that get Garth Ennis's comic, and there's some that are using it as a platform, whatever their causes might be. And I'm like, everybody needs to get on the same page and realize what The Boys is. Once again, if you're going to do the thing, do the thing. Stop trying to make it good for us. It's not vitamins. This is porn. This is superhero porn. Go for it. And the Authority is R-rated superhero mayhem, which should knock the whole culture sideways if it's going to be as kind of like risk-seeking as it should be.
Well, if you have the Superman legacy that I want, then as a counterpoint, I think that DC could absorb 2 things, 2 poles, where you can do something that is dark and raunchy and thematically different. Again, provided Gunn is allowed to transmit his knowledge of theme, his adept ability to handle actors and storytelling the way he has with Guardians of the Galaxy's movies, and even to a certain degree with the Suicide Squad. If he can maintain that, he's already ahead of where Snyder was at that point, because Snyder only was able to transmit. Snyder took from Nolan the style. He took from Nolan the visuals, the sort of dark reality of a Chicago-based Gotham, that sort of thing. And he was trying to make Superman out of that. Nolan was the executive producer of Man of Steel, along with Goyer, the storyteller. I think that Gunn is, as your keystone for building this, is going to transmit a different set of values to all the creators he brings in. So that, for instance, if Mangold gets to do a Swamp Thing movie, I think he'll behave differently than if you'd made Swamp Thing.
He'll be lucky to make any movie after Dial of Destiny loses $300 million for Disney. So I love James Mangold. He's made great movies in the past. I'm going into Dial of Destiny with rock bottom expectations.
All right.
I'm not getting it wrong again like I did with The Flash when I predicted it was going to make $1 billion. I'm predicting that Dial of Destiny loses every single dollar that was invested in it.
Go in your kitchen, go get the frying pan you make eggs in, and you watch when you fry them, the eggs slide right off because that pan is made of Teflon. And I don't think, first of all, if someone comes to your house and they say, hey, do you want to work for Spielberg and Lucas and direct the next Indiana Jones movie? You say yes no matter what comes next. You don't care how bad the story is. And Mangold, he's gotten Oscars for actors. He's conquered the business. He knows exactly what he's in the prime of his life right now. I don't think he's going to check this.
Ford v Ferrari kicked ass.
Yep.
310 to Yuma kicked ass. He's got a lot of good ones to his name.
Yep. He knows what he's doing. He's not going to take any kind of smear from this. This is going to be on. It's going to look like another fiasco from Lucasfilm. I don't think Mangold's going to suffer from it at all, nor should he.
All right. Well, my last question for you would be, of all the possible films or shows that might be made under James Gunn's reign at DCEU, either projects that have already been announced or ones that you just know exist. Like for me, I would love to see a Batman movie based on Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison. Like just an evening in Arkham Asylum with Batman against all of his enemies he's ever faced. Like sign me up. Nobody's talking about making that, but that would be my... If they're taking requests, if the DJ wants input from us, that's what I would request. What for you has you most fired up for the future when it comes to DC?
It is my faith in whatever Superman legacy will be, because for me now, even though I'm naturally more of a Batman guy, I think that Batman in all of his movie iterations has vibes. I vibe more with those movies, no matter what the tone has been. I've really been into them, but Superman has been a lot harder to get right. Whether it's Brandon Routh or Henry Cavill, it's been tough to kind of get through. The Salkins doing the last Superman 4 back in the day, and so I think now I appreciate now that I'm 108 years old, I see how hard it is to get Superman correct, and the benefit, the bounty that would come from getting Superman correct as a cornerstone for so many other things working beyond that. It's so important right now.
Yeah, pure and noble is hard to get right. Fantastic Four, Captain America, Superman, these characters are always a tough nut to crack.
Do you remember, it was just a couple of months ago, when the announcement was made, when Snyder did his video rundown, when he talked about the things that would be coming out, and granted, that's not going to probably be in concrete. He's talking about what we're going to wind up doing. But when he did like a video thing, I think it was like a 6-minute long video talking about, here's what's coming from my tenure as the head of DC Warners. The next day, he put a picture on Instagram that says, doing some reading this weekend. And what did he have in his hands? All-Star Superman. That to me,
it's so good. It's so
the best
good.
direction. It's the best direction.
Yeah,
exactly.
And when you read that, the art by Frank Quitely, you're just like, oh, like, can you just draw every comic like from now on? Like Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely together, whether it's New X-Men or was it We 3 or just they've done so much astonishing stuff together. Yeah, I'm almost giving myself a little miniature heart attack while mentioning it. I'm having chest pains. It's actually damaged cartilage from working out and getting buff. But if I die on the podcast or die on the live stream, it'll be worth it. So we're getting close to the end of the official live stream, and I'll do a few more questions. But here's a really important one from SJ Sharks Fan 39. When does the writer strike start having an impact? It seems like it's out there, but writers are still writing, ? I suspect James Gunn is still writing. He's not pencils down, even though he's supposed to be officially pencils down. How does the writer strike impact the DC universe moving forward?
Yeah, well, I think they're trying to pretend it's not. And by the way, writers are giving James Gunn shit for not putting out any, even if it's just platitude and lip service to the picketers. He hasn't done that yet. That doesn't mean he's not on the side of the writers. I think he's just trying to figure out what's the best way to do this where I don't piss anybody off, which is very obviously almost impossible to do in this market. a number of things that were already going have shut down. For instance, Marvel Comics hasn't been doing Daredevil, stopped shooting. Anything that was shooting in New York is being picketed right now, and the Teamsters can't come to work. So all the production in New York City has been shut down. I'm sure the production in Los Angeles is also being picketed. I think that they're trying to pretend like they're not, because they have a war chest of scripts that are probably all garbage right now because they need to be worked on, need to be machined. Who knows? Are they going to go into production with some of them? Probably. But I think that by the end of the summer, they're really going to be up shit's creek. And the question is, what kind of word will come out from productions? Scuttlebutt from the inside that confirms that. When does the first gossip start leaking out? Because people are going to be very loose-lipped, whether it's the guy in the craft services or the gaffer or the key grip or the best boy or the person who's putting prosthetic noses on people. They're going to tell you it's like this production is suffering because we don't have writers. And it's more pronounced than it's ever been before because everyone knows exactly what writers do now, as opposed to the other strikes.
All right. Well, question from your good pal, Mr. Kevin Marr. Thank you so much for tuning in. Kevin Marr is a comedy impresario here in New York who runs Kevin Geeks Out. And he also has a great, I'm blanking. What's the name of his new YouTube channel with Nick?
Atomic Abe.
Atomic Age. Atomic Ape or Atomic Age?
Abe.
Atomic Abe. Yeah.
Lincoln.
Everybody go over to Atomic Abe. But yeah, if you like deep dives into sitcoms, they got you covered. But Kevin's question is, do you think DC will find their footing with non-cinematic universe approaches? It sounds like you, at a minimum, think there is room for Joker 2 and Batman 2 to thrive in this new landscape.
Yeah, I don't know why I think this, and it probably has to do from growing up in an atmosphere where in our youth, we had Jose Luis Garcia Lopez images all over the place of these characters on lunchboxes, on Halloween costumes, on posters, on keychains, on shrinky dinks. And so, much the same way as Mickey Mouse now is unattached to a specific, it's a brand, it's not in a narrative. I think that these heroes in particular are better suited to be standalones and in some interpretation because people understand them more maybe than rank and file Marvel characters. Historically, Marvel has done a very good job since Iron Man. But it's like before that, we know exactly who Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, but they had fucking cartoons out in the 70s. Don't get me wrong. Marvel
Challenge of the Supervillains, baby. I grew up on that shit.
It was enormous. And it's like we're living in the world where people know who Superman is. And I think they will take Superman and Wonder Woman in any incarnation because they're used to seeing it stood alone for a long, long time. That's kind of the history.
They've been around since the late 30s. So yeah, many generations are familiar.
Exactly. So yeah, I think DC in some ways is better insulated or better. It stands in better standing to put their IP out separately outside of a continuity. Could almost prosper from it if you want to.
Yeah, but they also are the building blocks and the foundation of the entire thing. Like without the trilogy or the Trinity, as people describe them, the whole DC universe kind of falls to pieces. Because as a comment here by A.I. Pacino, he writes, DC should be one of the biggest brands in the world. It's crazy. I think that as much as I grew up as a Marvel guy and I love the grittiness of the New York-based stories and the New York-based vigilantes like Moon Knight and Daredevil and Power Man and Iron Fist and Spider-Man, I loved all that stuff. I think the icons belong to DC. Yeah. Flash is an icon. Green Lantern's an icon. Martian Manhunter's the original 7 Justice League members, when they're drawn by Alex Ross, it's as iconic and godlike as superheroes get. And I feel like they have not done an adequate job of like Ezra Miller is not an icon. I'm sorry. He is kind of a wisecracky sidekick. Flash should be almost like Hermes himself is coming down from Mount Olympus to spend some time with us. They should be godlike. And they just, anyway, I just feel like, long-winded way of saying that, Mr. A.I. Pacino, I agree with you. The DC movies should be as big as any movies that have ever existed. They should be as big as Star Wars. I've got DC Comics littering the wall behind me. I've got DC Comics filling my bedroom. I fucking love all these characters. And I feel like we haven't even approached 1% of what this universe has to offer. And I just worry now that we're going to get into a situation where every couple of years, like in the comics, they're just going to do a company-wide reset, reboot everything, and we're always going to be stuck in first gear, reintroducing Superman, reintroducing Batman. It's like, no, I want to know what happens to Batman 25 years into his career. I want Death in the Family on the big screen. That'll blow people's minds. Like, I want to know what happens next. Or with Justice League, I want to see them do it funny, like Giffen, DeMatteis, and Maguire did back in the day. There's so many different alternatives for where it could be taken, and I feel like we might be seeing it just taking many steps backwards before it takes any more steps forward.
I know that younger people can't vibe with this, but like it or not, or whether aware of it or not, they're living in the world of Adam West, Linda Carter, and Christopher Reeve. You don't have to have watched those shows, but suffice it to say, they existed and they made a space for themselves. And so the Wonder Woman of today is based on the Linda Carter of yesterday. And I think that you talk about what's iconic, the fact that there was Adam West, there was Linda Carter, there was Christopher Reeve doing the heavy lifting for close to 50 years, over 50 years, 55 years.
We had the Flash show in the 90s.
John Wesley Shipp was the Flash. Exactly. I just, like you said, the Trinity are so important in so many ways, but because they've just been, it's like Mickey Mouse at this point. Is anybody going to tell you that Mickey Mouse is a loser, that Mickey Mouse is like a lost leader? No, Mickey Mouse is fucking important. Not because you associate Mickey Mouse with anything in particular, other than maybe the Sorcerer's Apprentice from
I like Fun and Fancy Free. Fun and Fancy Free's got some good Mickey.
But Mickey, has done the work, and they played him smartly even after Walt died in 1967, I think it was 66. That they've kept him alive wisely somehow, even though he's untethered from specific adventures. It's just he's an icon.
All right. Well, one last comment, because I have to go to the bathroom so bad that I'm starting to sweat, but this is a perfect comment to end on. Nico Lord writes, strongly disagree. Sucking balls isn't always bad. I completely agree. If there were a cinematic equivalent of somebody putting somebody's testicles right in their mouth and giving them a good, like those ball washers on the golf course when you're washing like a ball and whatnot, I feel like a lot of DC needs to be put into the golf ball washer or somebody's open receptive mouth and whatnot. But anyway, I want to do a lot more of these live streams moving forward. And I feel like there's so many franchises right now that deserve an autopsy or a postmortem or whatever the case might be. I hope we'll see a situation where some of these franchises start to, I guess, reduce their downward spiral and start to rise again. There's so few franchises right now where I'm optimistic for the future. There are a few, so all hope is not lost. And I think also it just opens the door. We need more franchises. So one last question for you, which I think kind of gets at the root of the direction of all this stuff. Some have said or opined on the podcast, The Town, which you and I both like, that Gen Z looks at these characters in a different light because they grew up with the movies and the shows. They've never been in a situation where they yearn for a day where their favorite comic book characters might get adapted. Whereas millennials and Gen X can totally relate. Oh my God, like I really wish somebody would just get Lobo right. Or I wish somebody would get the Punisher, get it right. Is the comic book kind of adaptation or superhero genre kind of doomed because the younger audience now has no attachment to the source material? Or does it just mean that it's going to be like a pure cinematic landscape that's totally divorced from all the text and all the pages that came before?
Well, that's interesting. I think the success of Mario Brothers movie and the Sonic movies, which, are both runaway hits, those are things that kids grew up with, and younger people than us. Granted, they were there for our childhood, but they had a certain importance for younger people. They grew up with those IPs, those video game-based IPs in ways that we didn't. But even more so is that kids thought about, One Punch Man and Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z in ways like that for a lot of people. Was those things that wonder, are those going to be done correctly? Could those, and those were already cartoons and sort of animated features and things like that. So perhaps that's the next frontier, is seeing the properties that we didn't grow up with, but are sort of more of the last 15 years variety or last 20 years variety, if you want to think of it that way. Maybe that's the invigoration that sort of superhero or fanciful, colorful comic book IP take is, what is the next generation of stuff to adapt? Because perhaps comic books, aren't being read by anyone younger than, 40. That's probably
even James Gunn acknowledged that in a recent interview. He's like, nobody's reading comics. Like it's a tiny drop in a very large bucket, but they love manga. They love video games.
Yeah, no, it's true. And so it's like if you start making live action, I don't even know how the fuck that worked. They tried Airbender, and that was
and there's more Airbender coming, but anyway, yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Anyway, but shout out to Paul Murphy, our editor from Australia friend. He's been a frequent contributor to Wrong Reel in the past, and I would love to get Paul Murphy on a live stream at some point. Nobody likes talking shit about the plight of modern movies more than Paul Murphy. Like his podcast, Screen Psychics, every single review ended with, and I walked out after 20 minutes, and I walked out after 30 minutes. So I would love to get Paul on to talk some smack.
And again, that name of this podcast is Screen Sidekicks, Sidekicks, in case you're looking for him.
All right. Well, as a way of just kind of wrapping this up, where can people find your YouTube channel, your podcast, your Twitter, et cetera, and so forth? Because if I don't make a mad dash to the bathroom, I'm going to be spraying all over my camera. So let's bring this sucker, wrap the sucker up. I can't even talk.
I'm on Twitter at William Scurry. My podcast is I Don't Get It, and it is at Noah and Bill Show. And I'm all over the socials. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/AMC. You can find my video reviews, and I'll see you in the funny pages.
All right. Thank you so much for everybody who tuned in. Remember to hit that notification bell to be notified about future content. I think I gave out 60 memberships over the course of this, or maybe 40. But anyway, I hope everybody scooped up some memberships for some future live streams. But for the next few months, nobody's going to pay for any memberships. I'm going to be donating them all. So if you want a membership, just let me know. I will send one your way. And then I'll be doing a live stream sometime in the next week or two for members of the channel, where members will get to talk and everybody will get to watch. But anyway, I'm just trying to throw it at a net and get as many new members as humanly possible before I kind of like officially decide what to do with the membership aspect of the channel. But we can't thank you for watching. We greatly appreciate it. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards. Boom. Ending broadcast now. I'm getting a little spinny wheel.